Who's asking questions?
I'll be the moderator.
Oh, okay.
You're already recording.
But we're going to try to do this in one shot, so there won't be any editing. So
Alvis has left the house.
hold.
Get light in the background.
There we go.
Okay, man, this is super cool. We are going to have a Father's Day forum discussion here, and I'm super stoked about this because I don't know if we've ever done this together. All of us together for a Sunday kind of, talk or whatever. Is first time?
First
Ever?
time.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's not assume anybody knows who we are, even though our names are on the screen. Just realized that. Let's introduce each other. So I'll introduce my youngest brother, Gabe, and then I'll get him to introduce somebody else on the screen, and then we'll go like that. Okay? Sound good?
Sure.
So this is my younger brother, Gabe. He's the guy right below me. I'm not sure if it'll actually record this way, but the guy with no hair. Well, that doesn't. The younger guy with no hair. Gabe is pastoring in Grand Forks, BC, and has been there for 8. Is it longer than 8? 10 years. Holy.
10 years.
Whoa.
So Gabe's been pastoring with his wife Rachel there for 10 years, and the unique part about our relationship, I think one of the unique things, is that Rachel is actually my wife Sarah's sister. So there's this weird thing going on that's completely legal, all above board, but and they have 4 kids, most of them adults at this point, and so that's Gabe. Gabe, you take the next introduction.
Okay, so right below me is my dad. His name is Gordon Warner, and he has been pastoring up in Dawson Creek for 26 years, 20 years, a long time. Of course, he's been in ministry now for 4 decades, has it not? Or 5?
Almost 5.
Almost 5 decades of continuous ministry, which is absolutely mind-boggling. That's simply awesome. So he and my mom are both pastors up in Dawson Creek, and they have 3 boys. And you can hear their voice on the screen right now, and you can also see where I get my lack of hair from if you look at my dad. I come by it honestly, and I tell my boys, you're going to come by it honestly as well. Yeah, so, cool.
And I have below me my older brother, Tony. And Tony and I are about 1 year and 4 months apart as far as age. Tony is just a little bit older than me. And Gabe is actually, I'm the middle guy. Gabe is 1 year and 1 month younger than me. So we're all 3 like super, super close in age. But Tony is pastoring up in Fort St. John, British Columbia, has been there for 19 years, 2001, right? Isn't that when you went up there?
Oh, it's 2003.
2003, okay. So, but he's been pastoring there since 2003, and he has 4 kids, all adult kids now, and 3 grandkids, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but so Tone's the oldest one, and he was the guy that was the responsible one growing up that would be the one mom and dad left town. He was the one that made sure all the dishes got done, and I would say Gabe and I used that responsibility to our advantage to get away from having to do a lot of chores over the years. But yeah.
And so last but not least is my middle son, Rich, and he is currently pastoring in Ferndale, Washington with his beautiful wife, Becky. They have 5 children, so they broke the mold. All the other 2 boys have 4. They have 5, and their second oldest just graduated from school. Kind of different, but not having a regular ceremony, but they just graduated from school, Taylor. And so he doesn't have any marriage yet. Got 1 boy and 4 girls. But the big thing about Rich is he was in Dawson Creek for 9 years. And so a lot of our people in Bethel, you'll remember Rich. And and all of his children were born in Dawson Creek as well. So Rich has been in Ferndale for 10 years, right?
Yep.
I think 10 years.
In a bit.
And yeah, so he's doing well down there. And so we're excited to be with you. So this is going to be a good time.
I completely forgot to mention that Tone's been married for how many years now? 24 to Sarah?
Man, you had to do that to me. I don't even know. Okay. Dog. Coming on 27 years.
27. Oh my goodness. Okay.
1993. Yeah. It's really cool. So our churches, we're just assuming you guys are all watching. I pastor Evangel Chapel in Fort St. John. Rich, you pastor Christ the King Ferndale in Ferndale, Washington. Dad's at Bethel Pentecostal Church in Dawson Creek. And Gabe is at
River Valley Community Church.
Why do I always Riverside?
River Valley.
You and everyone else. I've heard Riverside. I've heard Kettle River. I've heard just everything.
I don't feel so bad, but
No.
we just want to say we're excited about kind of letting everybody in a little bit onto our story a bit. One of the things that I find to be super remarkable about our family, I think, in this setting here, is that all of us are pastors and have all walked into that. And over the long haul, I mean, it seems like in our culture and day, it's one thing to pastor, but it's another thing to pastor on the long haul. And there's such an attrition rate, people that start off and then don't stay in the ministry, but we all have over the long haul and have been in our churches actually for quite a while. Rich, how long have you been in Ferndale? Is it 10 years?
Yeah, September 2009 was when I started.
So let's start with that question. Talk a little bit about your call to ministry and what brought you into pastoring. And I mean, I'm sure it will have something to do with Dad. Father's Day. Who would like to just talk about that? It's a pretty crazy thing.
Yeah, well, I can go, and I'll try to make it. It's a big question to try to make sum it up really quick. But I would say for me, I first knew that I was going to be involved in some kind of vocational ministry when I was 15, and it was at one of our youth rallies that we had in Bella Coola, BC. And I remember the altar call moment where I went down to the front. It's kind of like my all-in moment with Jesus. And at the same time, I knew that I was going to have some kind of role in vocational ministry in a church setting. And so, but then I would say I probably spent most of the next 15, 20 years actually constantly pushing against that. And I was never the guy that was jumping up and down saying, pick me for vocational ministry, because having grown up in a home with a dad who was a pastor, you see behind the curtain, and you know exactly how not only the joys of being a pastor, but you also see all the hardship that goes with that. And so the ups and downs and all that kind of stuff. So I would say to get to the point where I'm at right now as a lead pastor, my official role is actually campus pastor, but it's like a lead pastor role in the church that I'm in. It wasn't until I was, I don't know, probably late 30s that I finally was like, okay, God, whatever kind of role you want to have me in, I'll do it. And it was a place of surrender. But definitely being molded and shaped in a home where your dad is a pastor and that's your world, and you see, like I said, the good parts and the bad parts. There's definitely the good outweighed the bad. And yeah, I just always wanted to, at the end of the day, follow Jesus into whatever he had for me, and knew that he had pastoral ministry as a calling in life.
Very cool. I think when you talk about that youth rally, I was there at that. I would have been 16, obviously, if you were 15, but that was a huge impact. Do you remember that, Gabe?
Nope. Sorry.
Gabe was doing all those funny characters and plays. You remember that?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
This one was actually a different one than those. This was the very first one that we had. It was George Clapp, it was the guy preaching.
Oh,
And
okay.
the thing I was most excited about going into the conference was a few of the girls that were going to be there. Not, you know, but yeah, God had some different plans for sure. And it was very, very, it was, I mean, it was one of the, you pick a handful of moments where you were shaped in a short period of time. And that's definitely in the top 5 for me.
Like a water.
Hmm.
What about you, Gabe?
I was 11. I was laying on our top bunk in our trailer in Bella Coola there. And I just remember feeling God's presence come into the room. And I really felt at that point that I was being called into pastoring, being called into, and it was a pretty direct call to pastoring. And I was kind of like Rich a little bit, different, but just kind of, well, I think at that age I wanted to be a scientist, to be quite honest. I have no idea. 11 years old, I wanted to be a scientist, but I still remember day wanting to be a scientist and going, well, God, I want to be a scientist, not a pastor. I think just because I loved biology and I loved being out in the bush and just have always enjoyed being outside. So I think that's kind of what pulled me that way. And then after that, we really got into basketball. So I wanted to be a basketball star, just like Michael Jordan. Who didn't want to be like Michael Jordan? But then, so I went to college, and my call was just confirmed quite a few times, a number of times by people over the years, pastors, visiting pastors that would come. Of course, Mom and Dad confirmed it lots of times. Both you, Tony, and Rich have confirmed that call as well at key moments when there's been some pretty heavy doubts about, is this really what God has for me? Because there's always been a lot of fear in my life regarding some aspects of being a pastor, namely the getting up and preaching in front of people. That was one of those things that I just always kind of dreaded. And God really released me from that fear a number of years ago, and confirmed that call to my life. And now that's one of the things I enjoy the most about being a pastor, is being able to speak into people's lives as God enables us to do that. So there's been lots of great confirming moments, lots of reward moments, and like Rich talked about, loads of challenging moments and head shaking moments and head scratching moments. And it's been up and down and all over the place, but it's been great. So yeah.
It's funny that you guys go back to your time as kids, teenagers, and even like you. That's the first time I think I've heard that story, Gabe, at 11. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I was 26, and I had already been pastoring for 7 years, and I think I kind of fell into the family. That's all we knew was vocationally. Watching Dad was the life of a pastor and being in a pastor's home, and so I think. Though I definitely felt a sense of calling, and I think it might have been the same retreat that you're talking about, Rich, was when I was 26 that I felt like Jesus I was being ordained. Funny place to figure this out. But I just felt a very direct call at that point. And I usually go back to that point as a reminder of the calling on my life at 26. But hey, Dad, did you? So obviously, you can certainly talk about your calling, but I'm curious, in light of the Father's Day theme, what were you picking up in our lives as you were kind of fathering us through this? Because obviously, I mean, you can't deny the apple hasn't fallen far from the tree, both with hair and just so you all know, Rich actually has a bald spot too. It's just.
Yeah.
It's getting back there. It's going back a lot.
So Dad, like, comment about the calling and maybe if you can also about what you were seeing in us as boys in the house.
Okay. My call basically happened over a period of years, like a lot of yours. I remember going to summer camp, you know, and the pastor would give that call about committing your life to the Lord. And of course, my dad was a pastor too during that time. So I just kind of felt like I probably was going to go into some kind of ministry. I wasn't sure when, but it became really clear when after your mom and I were engaged, we were out at Turtle Lake, Saskatchewan. I mean, I still remember like it happened yesterday, even though it happened 49 years ago. We were at that camp together, and of course, your Grandpa Wilson was speaking at that church there. And Mom and I both felt very strongly a call to ministry. We didn't know what that would look like, but we really felt at that point we were called to, you know, some kind of pastoral ministry. And so after we got married, it wasn't long before we started going to a little First Nations village, Indigenous, I guess we call it now, across from where we lived in Campbell River. And we started having Sunday afternoon services. And it wasn't long before your grandpa, you know, came to visit us. And that was in September of 1971. And he mentioned to us, you know, there's a church that is got no pastor down in Arizona. You guys should go down there and pastor that church. And I mean, at that point, I hadn't even gone to Bible college. I was working in the sawmill and, you know, teaching Sunday school, being involved with the youth, going across to Quadra Island. So we said, well, we'll pray about it. And as we prayed about it, we really felt that's what God was leading us. So in November of 1971, you know, we packed up everything. And in our little Mustang, we took off for California, then to Arizona. And that's where it started. And the interesting thing is, about 25 years later, you know, I went on my sabbatical. We sold our house, so we were between churches. And so anyways, for the first 6 months, we just traveled. And then I came back and I thought, well, I better, as I'm looking for a church, apply for UI. And I remember when I was in the office and he was asking me, what are you looking for employment? So I'm a pastor. He said, well, besides pastor, what are you looking for? And it really was a God moment, because at that moment, I looked at, I said, well, there's nothing else. That's what God's called me to do. So he ended up just putting down pastor. So at that point, it was really deeply confirmed. And so that was 25 years after pastoring. Mm-hmm. I knew beyond a doubt that's where I was called to be a pastor. So for you boys, I mean, I guess I saw things in you. What's that?
Hold a sec. I just want to give reference. Like, my youngest son, Levi, is 20, and you were actually 4 months younger than him when you stepped into your first church, which
I was 20 when I pastored my first church.
Yeah, and he's actually older than you were by a few months.
Yeah.
Just think
there was no church though. Mom and I had to replant that church. The first Sunday we opened the doors, there was 2 kids that came.
Go ahead. I just thought that's an interesting reference, because we live in a different culture now where maturity is being pushed up, and there you are jumping in at that young age. But
yeah, I think it really helped the fact that I you know, I had a father that was pastoring, so I had a lot of the things that I needed to do it. But and I did my Bible college by correspondence too, so in case people are wondering. But as I was raising you 3 sons, as we were raising you 3 boys, I think it was quite early that we saw God's call in your life. I've had people ask me over the years, you know, your 3 boys are pastors. Did you push them that way? I said, well, I hope I did, because, you know, if I did, they're not going to last, because you need to have God call you. Mm-hmm. And I guess Mom and I both recognized the call of God in your life. I think sometimes before even you did. I remember when Rich was between our church and Ferndale, and he went working in the sawmill there. I remember that moment we had, went over to his house. He had his work boots on and get ready to go to the mill. And he said to us, it was quite an emotional moment, but he said to us, you remember that, Rich, that conversation? What am I doing?
Yeah.
And basically, I think it was a God moment. And we knew, Mom and I both knew that there was a call of God on your life, just like we did with Tony and Gabriel. We sensed that. You know, it really became clear, especially when we were pastoring in Bella Coola. We saw your giftings. I mean, you guys were pastoring the kids there. You know, you were giving leadership in youth and really involved in church and in our Christian school there. So we started to see those giftings quite early there, in your teen years.
I actually forgot about that moment in between. Yeah, that was a powerful moment.
It was.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I'm remembering those days in Bella Coola, and I think as a father, the way you, Dad, were with us has always been an inspiring thing to me. The way you guys would, and this obviously includes Mom, but the way you would release us into being partners with ministry, we still have an old video of Rich leading, and Gabe, the two of you guys are leading the singing part of the service together. Do you remember this? And you're standing side by side, and you're as stiff as can be, and you're just a little bit flat. And I don't know what kind of relationship you had with God really at that point, but Mom and Dad were releasing, always releasing. And I look at that and think, I think that's a huge part of why we are who we are today. It wasn't waiting until we had it figured out, but there was always a kind of releasing us to be partners and step out and lead.
Yeah, I would say I wouldn't even just use the word releasing. I would use the word pushing, because I have vivid memories of being, because releasing is kind of like you've got the little bird in the cage that's ready to just fly away, but the cage is there and you got to open the door and away they go. It wasn't like that for me. It was more like the eaglet on the edge of the nest, and the mama is pushing the eaglet off the edge of the nest. Because I just remember being, hey, Rich, you should think about leading worship. Or hey, Rich, you should play guitar on Sunday morning. Or hey, Rich, what about helping out in kids ministry? Or hey, it was that's my memory. It wasn't like the birdie that's anxious to go and, okay, we're going to let him fly.
Well, aren't we supposed to provoke one another unto good works?
No, it's good. Like I actually, that shapes the way that I am with, I would say with my own kids, in that it's this, I don't think I probably pushed them as much as you guys pushed me, and maybe I need to push them more, but it definitely shapes how I am with my kids, for sure.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that for sure. Like the idea of bringing them in as partners in life.
Yeah.
And I'm watching Gabe your live stream and seeing Aiden on the bass guitar and Maddie's leading worship. And I just think that is so interesting how that legacy has been carried on. And
one thing about having your kids involved with worship and stuff, you're never without musicians on Sunday morning. I mean, I can remember you three boys. I mean, you're all good on guitars, bass, drums, and piano, keyboards. And so I never had to worry about Sunday morning. I got three boys. One of them can do one of these things and lead. They can lead worship and even speak last minute. I mean, of course, Tony had to do that when I've only missed one Sunday, and I tell the story, church. I've only missed one Sunday because of sickness since I've been pastoring. Wow. And that one Sunday was in Bella Coola when I had my kidney stone. And Tony and Sarah were living upstairs in our suite up there. And I still remember I said to Tony, well, Mom said, well, you can't, Mom was saying to me, you can't preach this Sunday. You need to go to the hospital. And so finally I called Tony and said, I'm going to have to go to the hospital. You're going to have to speak today. And he did. You remember that?
I don't.
It was a good service, but yeah. So that was kind of neat to have all three of you so involved in ministry. It was a family doing it. And
you really had to lower I think I sometimes wonder in church world if we haven't created such a culture of excellence and production that you don't have room for that. But because I vividly, you can look back at the videos and it's just like, oh my goodness, that was awful.
Yeah, like I look at that video and I go, oh man, if I was dad, I would not have been putting me in that position.
Yep.
There's literally one spot in the video where we're singing that song River of Life, and everybody's got we used to do actions back in the day where you would jump up on spring up, oh well, and we stop the song. There's no background music. It's just dead, awkward silence. And I tell everybody, hey, everybody's not jumping. And everybody's just sitting there awkward. It's the most awkward video ever. But I think you're right, Tony. I think we have the standard and the bar. I think we put it way too high a lot of the times, and a lot of people miss out.
And one thing too, the church there that we were pastoring, they really released you guys, to develop your ministries.
Yeah, they let us fail and all that. Yeah,
they did. Yeah, so it was really a church that was just empowering you guys that way, which is good for all of our churches to empower the next generation, right?
Okay, we were going to try to keep this to 35 minutes, but we're going to go over a tad. We have about 10 minutes left. I wonder if I could just steer the conversation to this kind of question, and I think it's kind of what we were talking about ahead of time. But when and I know this is going to be, Dad, this is going to be more. We're going to speak about what we received growing up in your home, and maybe fathering moments that stand out to us and how it's impacted our lives as fathers. And then you just push in however you want to. But when Rich gave in, when we look at the example we have, what would you say were some of the lessons you learned from Dad? And obviously Mom's a part of this, but that have kind of carried into your world as fathers. In a world that there's so much dysfunction and there's not a lot of good examples. I think we all probably we recognize how unique what we have and experienced is. Mm-hmm. You can have this conversation.
Yeah. Go ahead, Gabe.
One of the things that I really picked up from Dad was the adventurous spirit that Dad has. Dad was always getting us out into the bush. I just remember going from Port Ellis all the way to Bella Coola, having never been there before, and literally discovering it for the first time with Mom and Dad. Like, it wasn't like they had gone down beforehand and scoped out the place, made sure, at least not to my knowledge anyway, scoped out the place, made sure everything was going to be according to what they liked and enjoyed, and were in the church for a while, got to explore housing in the area and make sure the housing was adequate and what the amenities were of the town, or just all of those things that seem to be really normal when you're moving for a lot of people, but that just didn't. And if it did, I just was maybe too young to even know. I think I was 10 years old when we moved to Bella Coola, but I just remember the whole adventure of it. Like, just we're picking up as a family, and all of us are going to where there's grizzly bears. All of us are going to where there's this big river where there's fishing and there's hunting, and there's just all this adventure that's just kind of waiting for us. And so that's definitely one of the things that I've carried on in my life and in my parenting, is constantly trying to keep that sense of adventure in our lives, and not settling for a comfortable, cushy life, but really getting out. And I know adventure looks different for everyone, but for us, it's really added so much life to our family when we experience adventure together. I mean, when we get around the table, we will often talk about the adventures that we've had as a family. And so that's one of the things. Another thing that I really picked up from Dad as far as being a father, and I hope I'm still on topic here, but another one of the things was just how light Dad always has been. It's hard for me to remember a stressed out Dad. I always a dad that's laughing, that's making light of situations where people would maybe disagree with him in something, and he just laugh it off, or just like not in a disrespectful way, but just in a light way. Always, never seeming like this burdened down person that was constantly under this yoke of ministry. Like, I just don't remember that guy. I remember the dad that was just the burden's easy and the yoke is light. That's what I remember. And just even now, that's still inspiring to me. And I still try to live that way when I start getting down and just discouraged, or just start thinking about the heaviness of ministry and the heaviness of being a dad of four grown adults. There's a lot of challenging moments all the time, lots of amazing moments, but lots of challenging moments as well. Mm-hmm. And trying to remain light in those situations. So, yeah.
And I would just say yes to both those things for me too. I won't get into them in detail. I'll add some other ones on, but definitely what those two things are huge. But I would also say, Dad, your integrity has been huge, and just the way that you're a man of your word has really shaped me. In that, that's a huge value for me, is just being a man of my word and being a guy that people can trust. And so the way that you are just a constant learner. I remember all the John Maxwell tapes, listening to John Maxwell. Enjoy. And all of our road trips. And I think, I don't know if you were intentionally doing it at the time, but I really think that had a lot to play in shaping us too. I know you're listening to them for your own personal leadership growth and development, but those things definitely, I think, shaped us as we're driving along in the Suburban on some road trip, listening to Maxwell. But the other thing too that kind of ties into John Maxwell is that you had this John Maxwell quote that you were always saying, "I don't have to survive." And it was this mentality that my identity, who I am, is not rooted in my job. It's not rooted in my ministry and yeah, whether or not things succeed or don't succeed. I don't have to survive. I'm a child of God. I'm a follower of Jesus at my core. I'm loved. And so I would say that hasn't always been true for me. I mean, there's times where I've definitely got way too attached to the actual job, and that has, my identity has been shaped around that. But I definitely have that phrase that you had, that was like your one of your mottos, "I don't have to survive," is that definitely plays into how I lead. And so, but yeah, no, there's a lot of things, but those are three things that definitely jump to the surface right away as far as how Dad's fathering has impacted me and shaped me as a dad.
So cool. I was just thinking of, obviously totally agree with everything you guys are saying. Like, it absolutely resonates. But I was thinking, Gabe, as you were talking about the positivity and finding the adventure. And I was thinking, Dad, like where you and Mom have pastored, it's interesting to me, like from Peach Springs, which Sarah and I went to Peach Springs a few years ago to find, where is this place that like that's where I was conceived, right? Was I conceived there? Somewhere.
Yeah, way to put it.
And so we were all born in the States, because it was from Peach Springs and then to Bishop, California, then to Port Allen.
Port Hardy, yeah.
Like
Port Allen.
We went to Peach Springs, and it's literally, as you drive into Peach Springs, it's this dark little town that just as soon as we went into it, I know there's beauty everywhere, but it didn't seem like the place where you would go to start a mega church. It just like, this is going to be a challenge, and it was a challenging church. And then Port Alice, and then Bella Coola, and now having been a part of some of the leadership that helps find pastors for those places, you realize those aren't the easiest places sometimes to find people. Nope, there's our timer. Okay, ignore the time. But yeah, you guys have gone into these what have been probably difficult circumstances and places where it's hard to find others to go. But you've made it so much fun and so much life-giving that we have our fondest memories in those places. And I don't know, I think it speaks to the posture you guys took in life around just seeing the adventure and seeing the beauty. And I think we all reflect that. I mean, look where we all are now. Ferndale, right? It's kind of like, it's sort of, where is it? It's kind of in between Bellingham and Vancouver, and then Gabe's in Grand Forks. I'm in Fort St. John, Dad's in Dawson Creek, and we love it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Dad, anything, Dad, that you're thinking as we're sharing these stories are kind of going, interesting, new to you, or something you'd add to it?
I feel like it's my funeral, all the nice things you're saying about me. I got to say, I was thinking when Gabe was talking about Bella Coola, for Mom and I gave God to give me the right partner to do all this. But Mom and I always felt, that we'll just go where God calls us to go. And I remember when we said yes to Bella Coola, one of the pastor's wife said to Mom, I heard you're going to Bella Coola. And Mom says, yeah, you're going to hate it. And of course, we didn't hate it, but we didn't need to go down there. We didn't need to see it because we knew God had called us. So it didn't matter what the home was going to be like. It didn't matter what the church was like. None of that mattered. It even didn't matter what the salary was going to be. We just knew that God called us to go there. And here we end up being in Bella Coola for 10 years. And I've told this many times to people. Out of Bella Coola, I think the three of you all had the call of God confirmed. Out of Bella Coola, two of you met your wives in Bella Coola. Out of Bella Coola, of course, Rich started to date Becky. So, out of Bella Coola, we have all those wonderful things that happen. Had I not answered the call of God, if we had not answered the call of God, and of course, it wasn't just Mom and I, but you remember I had a little family meeting. I said, here are the pros and here are the cons, of going to Bella Coola, but let's pray as a family. You guys remember that? Mm-hmm. So we all took 1 week to pray about it. I don't know how much you prayed about it, but we took 1 week to pray about it. And then when we got together again, all of us were in agreement. This is where God was calling us. So when we went to Bella Coola, it was not me saying, let's go whether you like it or not, because you were old enough. Tony was 13 at that time. So you guys were old enough to hear the voice of the Lord and to be a part of that decision-making process. So I think that really helped, and so we all went together to this great adventure, knowing that God had called us to go. And that really, to me, made a huge difference.
You had us at fishing.
The fishing.
The Warrior Boys are the reason that there's no fish in the rivers of Bella Coola.
The hooligans are back.
I had a moment, it was probably in the last couple of years, but we've just always been trying to push into gratitude, just really trying to live there. And I think our culture has just moved so far away from gratitude and to focus on what's not right and what's missing and what's owed me or whatever.
What I don't have.
Pardon?
And what I don't have.
And what I don't have, yeah. Sort of victim kind of mentality that just pervades our society. But so we've been trying to counter push into gratitude. And I was just having a moment where I was just like, Jesus, what should I be grateful for? And there was things that I felt were coming to my mind and one after another. But I very specifically at one point, he said, be grateful that you were born into the home of Gordon and Linda Warner.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And so I was kind of just thinking through that. It was a different way than I'd ever worded it. It was almost like he was saying, don't just think of them as your parents. Think of the fact that I actually chose them and be grateful that you were born into that home. And I saw you guys as 19-year-old kids basically stepping out into the very tangible act of following Jesus. And I at that point I hadn't really thought about it like that, but it was like Jesus was like, I put you in the context. I incubated you in the context of a man and a woman, at that point, a young man and a young woman that were committed to following Jesus. And you just said that, Dad, so beautifully. Like the whole thing in this culture of, even in Christian culture, it sort of drives me nuts, but we say we're following Jesus, but we're really following trends, and we're following, reputation and other things, but there was just, no, it's where God's calling us to go, and we'll go. We don't need to see it ahead of time. And you've just modeled that. And I think the consistency as well, and Rich, you alluded to this at the beginning. I think that's a real thing for me. The seeing behind the curtain was probably one of the things that made me, I remember the Port Alice days where, Dad, you were almost single-handedly building that church. And for a little while, you just kind of disappeared in the busyness. There was such a huge demand. And yet in all of that, you and Mom were consistent, and you never spoke a bad word about people. I don't remember that. I do remember it was probably, it just started lead pastoring. And I think we had a phone call because I was going through some interpersonal stuff with people, conflict. And I just was like, whoa, what's happening? I didn't even know, I honestly didn't know this was part of the mix. That people would misunderstand you and feel like you were trying to control them, and weird kind of stuff like that. And then at that point, this is years later, you said, well, yeah, that happens. Did you know about this story? And you told a couple stories, and I was like, no, I had no idea. That person was a rock star in my books. I didn't know that they felt that pastors only work one day of the week. Sunday morning. I don't even know if Rich and Gabe know the story. Maybe you've heard it, but
A little bit, yeah.
But you were always so honoring and just solid and committed, but unwavering. Well, we're running out of time. Any final thoughts, or maybe we need to make this legal for the Sunday crowd and bring a scripture into play?
Well, a verse that has come to me often is train up a child in the way that he should go. And I think as parents, we need to have a lot of discernment, to understand what is the pathway that God has for my son or my daughter. And rather than trying to make them fit into our mold, make them fit into what God has for them. And so Mom and I tried to do that. We tried to hear, what is God saying? How should we train up our sons? What is the pathway that God has for them? And we're not perfect. Don't want anybody to have the impression, we make mistakes, but we want to hear the voice of the Lord, and we want to say, okay, God, I want to raise them in the path that they should go, the one that you have for them. So to me, that has always been a verse that has, resonated in my thinking all the time.
What about you guys?
I would say probably Psalm 127. That's children are a gift from the Lord, and talks about how they're arrows in the quiver, and you get the picture there in that psalm of just how our job as parents is to, well, one of the biggest jobs we have is just to value them and to love them. And we talked about calling earlier on to vocational ministry, but my greatest calling in life is hands down to be a dad to my kids. And so, so just to be that dad that is constantly speaking life into them, constantly, we're in the teenage years too, and I can kind of relate to what Gabe said. There's a lot of challenges. Presley's just kind of on the beginning, well, not quite there. I'm just like soaking up all these last years where they love me and want to be with me. But it's challenging, and so just keeping the perspective, hey, these are my 5, and Becky, but my 5 greatest treasures in this world, and just keep speaking life over them and helping them discern what's next for them. I had Ethan and I sat down last night and went over his last thing for this school year. It's called the High School and Beyond Plan, where you help them figure out what their qualities are and what some passions of theirs are. And it was just fun sitting down with him and going, okay, he's this unique individual that God has a unique plan for, and helping him figure out, okay, what does that look like for him? And so, but yeah, Psalm 127, I love the way it speaks into that, and just how your kids they're a gift, and they're these arrows that we pull back and we help launch them into life. And so that's what, as a dad, that's what I want to do. I want to do it well, not just with career, but the most important thing is that they would love Jesus and love people. So,
Wow.
My verse that I would share, my verses have changed over the years. So it started off with one thing and moved into another. And I think you guys both touched on some verses that have been a guide that I've leaned on. So I'll just share a couple. The one that is in Ephesians chapter 3, where it says, don't provoke your children to anger. Believe it or not, that's been a real roadmap for me. Just because I think that as a dad, part of the way I love my kids is by bugging them, instigating that a little bit. And so I've had to really realize, okay, this is probably not the best thing I'm doing right now. So that's been one of those things throughout the years. But one of the scriptures that God's really brought to my heart is really when Jesus, it's John chapter 13. And I've tried to live this with my children, especially as they become young adults and as they become teenagers. And that is to be an example to the best of my ability. And I know I fail at this all the time, but to be the best of my ability to be like Jesus, who got up from the table, grabbed the towel, and just started washing his disciples' feet, and talked about what it was to basically lead. And I believe that as a dad, one of my biggest roles is to lead our home. And so that's really spoken to my heart about humility and being a father, love, and just how valuable it is that I not only tell my kids that I love them, but that I show them that I love them. So especially as they've gotten older and things have changed in our home, now they're going off to work. So how can I serve them? So I can set the coffee maker so that they have hot coffee before they go to work. I can clean up the dishes. I can do lots of little things, which is basically just trying to shift that paradigm of thinking from I'm the dad that needs to be served by my children to, okay, how can I flip this completely on its head in a Jesus style, where I am serving them and doing all tasks that I would expect them to do for me. I just really have felt like God has really just hit that home with me. I remember, I don't know if Dad ever did this, and maybe this is more of a Mother's Day thing, but I still remember I would leave moldy dishes in my room.
Yes.
Weeks, because I would eat up there. And I would take my meals in my room, and which is so funny because it's something that my kids do as well. And I remember that Mom would go up when I was gone, and she would pick up all the dishes in my room, and she did this all the time. And maybe you did this too, Dad, I don't know. But I specifically remembered Mom doing this, and that's just something that just recently, it's part of this serving my children. And rather than harping on them, hey, why don't you do this or that, to just go into the room, pick up their dishes and wash them. It's no deal, right? In the grand scheme of things, to me, that's what love looks like. And that's what leadership, and that's what being a father looks like, serving those kids. So, yeah.
Super good.
Interesting.
The verse that comes to my mind is 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1, which I found to sort of be a guiding principle, like you were mentioning Ephesians there, Gabe. And it's follow me as I follow Christ. It's Paul's words to kind of his modus operandi, I think, in some ways, was I'm going to keep my eyes on Jesus, and I'm going to try to live out what I'm asking you to follow me in. And So I feel like that's been modeled for us by mom and dad, and just this not necessarily preaching at us. In fact, I don't remember that hardly ever happening, really. I mean, like there's some homes that have, like, there's a certain structure they have, but I don't ever remember us very often sitting down and going, okay, let's talk about what it means to be a Christian, or let's talk about what it means to be a pastor. It was lived out for us, and then we would track behind. I hope nobody who's listening gets the idea that life was perfect for us, that there were no issues. Maybe that's part two to this discussion, is all the things we didn't do right, or that we messed up on, and we bring our kids in on that discussion, right? And they would probably need maybe an hour and a half. But the positive, whatsoever is good, pleasing, and praiseworthy, think about this. And we all gravitate there. And I think the reason we do is because mom and dad did with us growing up. Like, it was always pushing towards what can be great, what can be thankful for here, or what is the adventure in this new season. And so it's interesting to me that we even model that now. We're all kind of gravitating to, whoa, this and that, and probably learning a few things ourselves in the journey. Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much out of time.
Yeah.
Dad, how do you want to close this?
Close in prayer.
Is there anything you want to say, Dad? Like, give you the final word, the grand poopah?
I just want to say, for those who are watching today from the various churches or from wherever, that none of us here are perfect. And if we give you that impression, that's not true. We are not perfect. The thing that we realize is that we before God, we want to do our best. And I got to tell you, there was a lot of people that spoke into my life. Some like my own parents, Linda's mom and dad, and then people like John Maxwell, Dr. James Dobson. So all these people have had influence in my life, and so we try to pass it on to our boys. So we're not perfect, but God has given us our children, and He's entrusted them into our care, and we just need to say, God, how do you want me to raise these kids that you've given me? So I think Rich is the one that gave that verse, that children are a heritage of the Lord, out of Psalm. So we need to just honor that these children belong to the Lord. How does God want me to raise these kids for Him? So I know our time is gone, so I'll stop there.
Well, it's been really cool doing this, guys. I mean,
Yeah,
It has been.
why don't we have a couple of us anyways?
Sure.
Maybe just close in prayer, and this will be it.
Okay.
I can go. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for, God, this time that we could have together. And Lord, I just want to thank you for, God, my dad, the dad of the three of us. And I thank you, Jesus, for the tremendous example that he was to us, and still is, obviously, of what it looks like to follow him as he follows you, Jesus. And I just, God, we're so blessed. And I just want to lift up, Lord, all those that are watching, and I just pray, God, that this has been encouraging for them. God, I pray that there would be some things out of this that they could take and go, okay, I'm gonna live a little differently, or I'm gonna parent a little differently in light of this. And I just, God, I know that you've been speaking to people, and I pray, God, that for those that are parents, that God, it would help them to raise their kids to follow you. And God, I just thank you so much for your grace that covers, God, a multitude of sin, mistakes. And I just pray, God, that we would, God, at the end of the day, God, that we would parent in light of your grace, in light of, God, just how much we need your help and how we can't do without you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And God, I'm just thankful. I'm thankful for the home that I was brought up in. I'm thankful for the experiences that I had. I'm thankful for the wisdom that was passed down, the wisdom that was given to me and to my brothers and our families, all of us. And it's a wisdom that I believe won't only go to my generation, but will continue to go from generation to generation for as long as you shall tarry. I just, I'm grateful to you, God. I know the blessing, and I'm thankful for the blessing. And I give you thanks, God, for the blessing. And God, I pray that you would help us to be what you've called us to be, that journey that you've called each one of us to, that road. Fathers, that you would help us to be the father that you want us to be. That our families would represent what you would have them be. Help us to get as close to that mark as possible. Help us to always be pursuing a closeness with you, God. I know that when you're in the center of our homes, Lord, that everything is so much better with you. So I pray for homes, God, that don't revolve around you, that you are not the center of the home. I pray, God, that you would become the center, not only of us fathers, but the center of our home, and the center of even the center of what's going to be passed down to the next generation and the generation that follows and beyond. We just thank you, God.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Good.
Boom. That was all right, hey?
It was good. It was fun. I was kind of concerned about how it would go, but I think it went really well.
You're
Mama,
still recording, Tom.
I know.